Walls of Destiny. Part 1. Chapter 8. The Kalamando Road. Soon after, the sound of wooden wheels cutting through the grassy path to the grove signaled the anticipated return of Burdock with the carriage. Burdock excitedly dismounted from the carriage and beckoned for the others to show them the carriage with all the excitement of a young child. "Where's Napari?" Is she," said Burdock looking at Losgrel. Losgrel gave an affirming nod. "All right, good. And do not worry, she will awaken refreshed and invigorated and ready to ride back home in just a couple of hours. Now," he said as he brought them to the rear of the carriage. "I had them build this hidden compartment for the two of you. It is a bit cramped, but it will only be for a few hours until we get off the highway. And here, we have grains and other merchandise in case patrol should stop us or if someone should ask to make a purchase. It is the perfect cover. And Losgrel, you will ride with the horses and Jack will pull the carriage. We just need to do some quick retrofitting before we leave. Oh, and I almost forgot. I purchased these special hats and tunics for Losgrel and I, which are pretty standard attire for merchants in these parts." "We will be targets," protested Losgrel. "Oh, nonsense. We will fit right in," retorted the wizard. "And there should be enough patrol on the road to keep bandits, pirates, and other riff-raff to a minimum." After a quick retrofit for Jack, Milo and Longfellow settled into their hidden chamber, making the comment that at least they wouldn't starve, and Losgrel rode ahead with the two horses and Burdock, sitting at the front of the carriage, took the reins. They were back on the road. When they arrived at the highway, there were only a few travelers in their midst. They passed a few merchants going east who unsuspectingly waved and nodded as they went by. Burdock began to whistle a familiar tune as a pair of young horse riders went around past them. When the tune was finished, Burdock tapped on the wooden wall that separated him and the two young men. "Can you hear me all right in there?" he asked. Burdock, upon hearing their muffled replies, continued. "Have you heard the parable of the 5 tears?" "No, I haven't," they replied in unison. "In a small village in the mountains just northwest of here, there was a villager named Selna," began the wizard before taking a puff from his pipe. "She bore only one child, a son. Tragically, at just 7 years old, the boy died of a fever. Needless to say, Selna was devastated by her loss. Selna was so stricken with grief and denial that she refused to bury her dead son. She was even sometimes seen carrying him with her when she went on walks and other business. One day a neighbor advised her to go to the local shaman, Robodari, that he may be able to bring her son back to life. Hopeful and full of joy, she immediately went out to visit the shaman. She begged the shaman to revive the boy. Robodari reluctantly said to the woman, "Yes, I can bring him back to life. However, you will need to bring me back some items required for the spell." He gave her a list of seemingly mundane items such as various roots and herbs and other things. It seemed to her a simple task, well worth the trouble to have her son returned to her. She was ready to go out and collect the items when Robodari spoke. "Oh, I almost forgot one thing. Take this vial and find a person who has never experienced a loved one die and collect 5 tears from them. The tears must be all from the same person or the spell will not work." It seemed to her an odd request, but not impossible. So, she took the vial and began toward her home. First, she collected all the herbs and roots on the list. They were not difficult to find, most of them growing within a half-mile of her home. When she was finished, she set them all in a basket near her door and went into town in hopes of filling the vial. On the path into town, she came upon a young boy sitting on the road crying. "What is wrong?" she asked as she placed the vial near his eye. "Have you lost someone close to you?" "No," said the boy. "I fell down the hill. But I will be okay." She helped the boy to his feet and headed toward town with only one of his tears. Burdock paused momentarily as he eyed a small caravan moving in the opposite direction. He glanced back at Losgrel, who gave an approving nod. "Now where was I?" "Oh, yes," he continued. When Selna arrived in the village, she glanced around at all the busy folk scrambling about, most of whom she knew. And she knew that most of them have in fact experienced the loss of someone close to them. Then she spotted a crying baby. She thought. Surely this baby can't have known loss yet. Selna eagerly held the vial close to the baby's eye and filled it with a tear before his mother snatched him up, declaring, "He's hungry." Selna begged the woman to let her collect more tears, but the woman just looked at her with scorn and hurried away. Desperate and frustrated, she continued to look for more tears. She passed by the village philosopher, nearly bumping into him. He called out to her. "There is nothing in this world worth being in such a hurry over." She turned to him and told him her reason for her haste, and all about her son. As he listened to her underscore story, he felt much compassion for her. "I can only imagine what it must be like to lose someone that close to you," he said as he began to weep. She held the vial close to his eye and collected but one tear. The man had stopped weeping and began philosophizing to her about what death means. She left the man, still speaking on what he didn't really know anything about, and continued her search. She stopped a man who was pushing a wheelbarrow of produce to ask him if he knew anyone who had never experienced a loss. He directed her toward a wealthy man, the wealthiest around, who lived up on the hill overlooking the village. She made her way up the hill and knocked at the man's door. As the door opened, the man peered out at her. His brow was heavy, and he looked quite troubled. "Beggars are not welcome. If you could read, You would know that, he said as he closed the door. But I only want to talk, she said, holding the door. The man was both puzzled and skeptical, but he came out of his mansion to talk with Selna. Be quick, he told her. You look troubled, sir. You have experienced a loss, she said in disappointment. A loss? Cried the man. A loss is an understatement. I invested thousands in silver on several grain silos over in the next village. The farmer told me today that they were all ravaged by a plague of vermin. I have had nothing but loss this year. Every investment I have made has gone wrong, he said as he slumped down on his steps and began to weep. Selma realized that he was not upset over the loss of a loved one, so she held the vial close to his eye and collected a tear. The man sprung to his feet. I don't have time for this, he said as he returned to the mansion. Again, Selma was beyond discouraged. She went back down the hill to the village but could find no one else. She went back to the shaman weeping. She said to the shaman, I could not even find 5 tears from 5 different people. How am I supposed to get 5 tears from one person? It's impossible, isn't it? Robadari held out his arms to comfort her. She fell into his arms and continued to weep until her pain became unbearable, when finally, a silent realization came over her. She took a deep breath and said, I understand now. She thanked the shaman and took her son home and buried him. Burdock paused for a moment, looked toward the carriage, and said, You see, everyone experiences loss. We must process it, just like Selna did. It can be difficult, but it can make us stronger if we do. Milo silently nodded. It was dark and cramped in the small compartment of the carriage, and it seemed to them like the journey on the highway was taking forever. They could feel the carriage slow down and come to a stop. They heard Burdock say something before getting out of the seat. An exchange of muffled voices took place not far from them, followed by footsteps. Then abruptly the back of the carriage was flung open. They could hear items being slid around, their tension growing. Milo nudged Longfellow as their minds began to race. Here it is, Burdock's voice rang out in the carriage. How many did you want? That will be, let's see, 24 cedros, please. The door slid shut and they heard Burdock climb back into the driver's seat. Relax, men. Sorry about that. He was just looking to buy some grain, he said as they began moving again. On the bright side, we are about halfway there, added the wizard, though his words were of no comfort to the cramped passengers. Onward they traveled, Burdock's melodic tunes, the rhythmic clatter of hooves, and the steady thump of Jack's massive feet, the only sounds punctuating the monotony of the journey. The wooden wheels of the carriage ground over the dusty road, and the dimming light within signaled that night was closing in. Milo and Longfellow, hidden in the compartment, felt a twinge of relief as they anticipated the journey's end. But just as their hopes rose, the carriage jolted to a halt. Don't make a sound, Burdock instructed in a low, urgent whisper. The Kalamando patrol had signaled for them to pull over. 2 men, formally dressed and bearing the dark complexion of the region, dismounted their horses and scrutinized the carriage and Jack with keen eyes and slowly approached Burdock. State your name and your business on this highway, one of the patrolmen demanded, his gaze lingering on the elephant. I am Bardicus, Burdock replied smoothly, tipping his hat with practiced ease. Delivering cargo of grains and sundries to Kalamando. The patrolman's eyes narrowed. And what is the name of the elephant? This is Jeeves, Burdock stammered slightly before regaining composure. He's not for sale, mind you. Jeeves' new owner is our first stop. Interesting, the patrolman said, his gaze shifting to the other man. Did you hear about the young man and the elephant linked to the death of the Princess of Westwood? Burdock's eyes widened in genuine surprise. Oh, dear me. I've been on the road for days. Haven't kept up with recent events. We'll need to inspect the carriage. Strictly routine, the patrolman declared as he approached the rear. Yes, of course, said the wizard. Burdock exchanged a tense glance with Losgrel, who was engaged in a calm conversation with the second patrolman. Longfellow and Milo could barely hear the conversation, but the clinking of the lock was unmistakable. It's locked, the patrolman called out in frustration. Burdock scrambled down from the carriage, his face flushed with concern. My apologies, he exclaimed, fumbling with the keys. I was robbed recently, prompting me to add the lock for security. As Burdock unlocked the door, the patrolman began examining the cargo. Every movement of bags and boxes felt like a needle in Longfellow and Milo's nerves. But then, the patrolman's attention turned to the secret compartment. There's a hidden compartment, the patrolman announced, his voice tinged with suspicion. The other patrolman, with a stern expression, ordered Losgrel down from his horse and approached the carriage. Both of you, step over here. Losgrel and Burdock exchanged worried glances as they were ushered to the side. Why is there a secret compartment? Demanded the patrolman. What are you hiding? Don't try anything foolish, warned one of the patrolmen. There are more of us around. Watch them while I open it. The tension in the compartment was palpable. They could hear most of what was being said due to the raised tones outside. Milo and Longfellow tried to stay perfectly still, nearly holding their breath. What do we do? Longfellow whispered urgently. Milo's hand hovered over his sword as he heard the patrolman crawling back into the carriage and nearing the compartment. His heart pounded in his chest. Wait. Burdock's voice was a strained plea. For your own safety, wait. I'll explain the compartment's purpose. Losgrel searched Burdock's face for any sign that the wizard might have something up his sleeve. Burdock responded with a quick, reassuring wink, for he indeed did have something up his sleeve. Slowly, the patrolman emerged from the carriage, his face a mask of frustration. What's in the carriage then? He pressed, his eyes narrowing at Burdock. In the chaos, Burdock had discreetly slid his hazel wand from his jacket into his sleeve and now slid it into his hand. With a subtle tap and a sweeping gesture, an invisible wave of energy emanated from the wand, reaching out toward the patrolman. The reason for the compartment is, there's no secret compartment, Burdock declared with a booming voice. Everything is perfectly in order here. The patrolman momentarily froze, visibly confused. There's no secret compartment after all, one said, exchanging puzzled glances. Everything seems to be in order. You're free to go. Travel safely, said the other in a mechanical tone. Thank you, officers, Burdock said, still attempting to maintain a smile as he climbed back onto the carriage. That was close, he murmured to Milo. I'm not sure how long the spell will hold, and it wouldn't fool anyone more perceptive than these patrolmen. Without wasting a moment, they resumed their journey, the carriage and animals casting elongated shadows in the fading daylight.